The tape pulled paint when I eased the bright orange rectangle off the front door. It smelled like citrus cleaner and dust, that oddly cheerful scent old wood gives when it's been scrubbed too hard. The afternoon light narrowed across the porch boards, carving my name on the mailbox into little gilded letters one by one. Under the black block letters, the number sat in bold, $50,000 due. 3 pages, 8 staples, 2 signatures that were not mine. I read the headline twice, 3-day notice to pay rent or quit, then read it again slowly, the way I read invoices at work, line by line, date by date, looking for math that doesn't make sense. My thumb found a staple and pressed into it until the sharp tugged at my skin. The wind lifted the corner of the notice, and I held it flat with my palm because I like paper to behave, even when people won't. My phone buzzed in the pocket of my gray slacks, the tail end of a group text from my Aunt Lila, trimmed just enough to look helpful. "We can settle this if you're reasonable," she'd written, time-stamped 12:07 p.m. I looked up the street where the jacaranda had finally let go, and the purple petals glued themselves to the sidewalk like little thinned stamps. A white sedan idled across from my driveway, windows up, driver pretending to scroll. I took a slow breath and smelled the last of the morning's coffee on my own sleeve. The air held that hot asphalt hum. Somewhere a radio murmured. I folded the notice in half carefully and slid it into a plastic sleeve from the stack I keep in the hall closet. I don't yell, I thought. E-document. The number $50,000 hummed like a bass note under the ordinary sounds of my street. I stood on my own porch with my own key in my hand and felt the first stakes click into place, clean and unavoidable. Who I am has always started with counting. I'm 32, a procurement analyst for a grocery cooperative that delivers peaches reliably in July and onions cheaper in January. My work is made of margins and paper, purchase orders shaped like decisions, contracts that tell the truth if you learn to read where the numbers lean. I bought this 2-bedroom Craftsman in Riverside 3 years ago when my grandfather died, and the market dipped just enough to make my calculator stop laughing. I put down $78,000, ran spreadsheets for weeks, and recorded the deed in my name in a trust the same day I signed. I did it because I grew up watching Aunt Lila help my mother with bills that got more expensive every time Lila touched them. I did it because when I was 8, Lila made me pay rent for the top bunk with monopoly money and interest. When I cried, she told me it would teach me not to be surprised by envelopes on doors. My grandfather taught me a softer version of the same lesson. "Own what you can prove," he said once, sliding a battered manila folder across his kitchen table at me, the brittle tab labeled title in a tidy, reluctant hand. He made me practice walking up to the clerk's window at the county building, taught me to ask for the stamp and to watch the way the clerk's hand moved, not the clerk's mouth. "What's signed is real," he said, "and what's recorded is safer." He tapped the ink until it dried. I took the manila folder home with me that day and tucked it on my top shelf behind a stack of cookbooks, because it felt like a talisman, proof you could hold. The lever here was precise. A fabricated lease and a ledger that manufactured rent where none existed. Tenant, Naomi Kestrel, the notice read, as if the black letters could change the shape of my life by insisting. The landlord listed was not a person but a limited liability company, LMI Properties, formed by my Aunt Lila and her husband Victor last spring, the same day I took down the for sale sign from my front yard to use as a closet shelf. The ledger tacked up $2,500 per month for 20 months, retroactive, as if the house had been charging me every time I watered the rosemary. They had stapled a residential lease agreement behind the notice, 12 pages with a typed signature block that traced my name perfectly wrong. Someone had dragged a cursor through a fillable field until something that looked like Naomi Kestrel flowed out. I traced the swoop of the L on landlord, an indulgence of a letter that Lila had always made too tall. If you have ever watched a person forge your name, even beautifully, you know the sensation. Recognition stripped of consent. A familiar that refuses to be family. The shift had been in motion before the orange paper appeared, and the part of me that catalogs things felt a small, mean appreciation for how neatly the dots connected once I allowed them to. First, a letter from the HOA addressed to occupant, announcing that LMI Properties would be managing landscaping compliance for my address. Then, a utility portal login that suddenly rejected my password and sent the reset email to Lemyadmina, a courtesy voicemail from a locksmith I didn't call, timestamped 8:32 a.m., saying, "Left the side gate key to like per request." And last week, An email forwarded by a neighbor, Lila's message to 3 other homeowners. We're standardizing rent payments so no one slips through cracks. It was boldness braided with sloppiness. The way people get when they believe their version of events has already won. I set the plastic sleeve notice on the hall table next to the small bowl where I drop my change. I called the number listed for payment questions. Victor answered, voice pretending casual. Finance, he said as if he'd always had a department. Naomi, I said. A beat. We prefer everything in writing, he said, and the smile sat in the words like a stain. Then read this, I said, and texted him a photo of the deed recorded 2 years and 11 months ago. The Black County stamp crisper than the morning I tucked it into its sleeve. I followed it with a screenshot of my trust certificate and the county index number, then a photo of the outside of my house with my name graved in brass on the mailbox. He didn't reply. The 3 dots flirted, stopped, started, then a single sentence. Lila handles occupancy. I have never wanted to be a lawyer. I like clean fights with numbers and apples that arrive unbruised. My ally, when I thought through who would care about this like I did, was obvious. A title examiner. I called the title office that had insured my purchase when I was scared and cautious and 30, and sat with my grandfather's manila folder like a shield. The receptionist, remembering my name in the way people remember good tippers, put me through to a junior who returned my call at 3:19 p.m., her voice a little quick, her consonants precise. This is Asha, she said. What's the index number? I read it. She tapped keys. I could hear her turning the wheel of her chair with her foot. What's going on at your address? She asked after a moment. Her voice flattened not with boredom, but with focus. I told her. The orange paper. The ledger, the forged lease blocks, the HOA email. When she had my details in a neat note, she said the sentence that became my grip. Title speaks last. It landed in my head with the right weight, like a tool set down in a drawer where it belongs. Title speaks last. I wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it to my fridge. Send me clear scans of everything, she added. Chain of title, current deed, your trust cert, and the notice. I'll compare what's recorded. If they tried to slide anything in, we'll see it. And if it's only paper taped to a door, we'll treat it like paper taped to a door. I scanned and emailed, and then, as my fingers finally trembled, I brewed tea. The kettle clicked its small click when it was done, a sound I like because it always tells the truth. I sat under the swamp cooler and watched the email status bars fill, little blue lines doing quiet work, and I let myself be angry for exactly the 60 seconds it took for the water to cool from scalding to drinkable. Then I put the anger away, because anger is an accelerant and paper is fuel. I prefer controlled burns. The move makes it sound cinematic. It wasn't, it was precise. I assembled an evidence packet the way I assemble cost models, front page with a table of contents, numbered sections, tabs. 1. Recorded deed, book X, page Y. 2. Trust certificate, dated, notarized. 3. Property tax receipts, 36 months. 4. Mortgage statements. If you have them, mine were 0. I'd paid it down hard the second year. 5. HOA correspondence. Screenshots where they swapped my email. 6. The 50,000 pay or quit notice, every staple visible. 7. The lease agreement with my signature. 8. Utilities screenshots, password reset to unknown. 9. Locksmith voicemail transcript, date, time. 10. Photos of the house, mailbox, porch, the key in my hand. Then I walked 2 blocks to the notary on University Avenue who sells postcards no one buys. He notarized my affidavit, the piece where I wrote in clean, declarative sentences what had happened and what had not. He slid the page back with a stamp that sank into the fibers like a tiny, satisfying bruise. I emailed my packet to the address on the notice and CC'd myself, Asha, the HOA, and my own attorney friend Jamie's personal inbox, not as counsel but as witness. Then I did 3 more things before dinner. I filed a notice of interest at the county recorder's office that essentially said, in bureaucratic English, I live here. I own what the records already show. I placed a no trespass letter with the police department, which in practice meant a patrol car would make a civil standby if anyone tried to inspect the property. And I printed a letter addressed to LMI Properties revoking any claimed management authority over my address, signed with a pen that doesn't bleed. It wasn't grand. It was the shape of someone who knows that if you give paper a job, it will do it. The first fallout was digital. 29 missed calls lined up like little dominoes on my lock screen by midnight. 9 from Lila, 8 from Victor, others from a number labeled LMI admin, and one my phone still recognized as my cousin Tara, who hasn't sent me a birthday text in 5 years, but suddenly wanted to catch up like old times. The first voicemail sounded like a customer service script run through a blender. "You have misunderstood the notice, Naomi," Victor said. "We can discuss repayment schedules. 50,000 is negotiable if you want to stay." The next one was all caps forced through voicemail. "You can't do this to family." The third picked a new costume. "Legally? You're a holdover tenant," Lila said. And the way she clipped legally told me she'd practiced it in a mirror, alone, in the dark glass of a microwave. There was also an institutional knock. At 8:07 the next morning, a process server set a packet on my mat with the quiet relief of someone who just wants to get to the next door. It was a filed unlawful detainer, an eviction lawsuit, already stamped and assigned a case number, set for a Monday hearing 10 days away. The name on the plaintiff line was LMI Properties. The defendant line spelled mine right, no flourish. The complaint attached a lease with rent due and unpaid totaling $50,000, a ledger, and 3 grainy photos of my house, my porch, and my rosemary as supporting exhibits. The thing about exhibits is they cannot smell. The thing about judges is they can read. Asha called a little after 9. "I checked the index," she said. "Chain is clean to you. No deeds recorded after your purchase? No management agreements recorded. There's a sham LLC forming a color around your address, but no recording tries. Title speaks last, Naomi." She paused, and I could hear her smile through the line for the first time. "You're doing it right. Keep your paper neat. Bring it to court. You're not a tenant?" It felt like water on a handful of dry wheat. I wrote "Title speaks last" on a new sticky note and stuck it to my case file. I slept that night with the fan clicking in the corner and the envelope of service on my dresser, a reminder that what we endure is not always what we accept. The courtroom where our lives got smaller and sharper was colder than necessary. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silences between coughs and the restless creak of benches. I'm not tall, but I sat in the front row like a person who expected to be called and planned to stand up without making the chair announce it. Across the aisle, Lila wore the cranberry blazer she pulls out for weddings and arguments. Victor gripped a manila folder with the confidence of someone who believes paper is a costume. LMI's attorney, a thin man with kind eyes and tired shoes, looked at me once, then looked away, the way people do when they have guessed the ending, but cannot change their lines. When they called our case, the bailiff's voice made everything equal for a moment. We rose. The judge didn't smile when she sat. She had the expression of someone waiting for a bus arriving at the same time every day. LMI's attorney spoke first. He called me a tenant. He used the word arrears in a sentence that made rent something I had tried to steal from my own house. He slid the orange notice toward the judge and tapped the ledger as if tapping could wake it into truth. When it was my turn, I did not tell a story. I put the evidence packet on the podium and handed the judge a copy, tabbed and numbered, as if she'd asked me for the best peach vendor in Kern County. "I am the record owner," I said. "Exhibit 1 is my recorded deed, Book 12672, page 318, recorded on March 12, 3 years ago. Exhibit 2 is my trust certificate. Exhibit 3 is 36 months of property tax receipts. Exhibit 4 is mortgage statements, all 0 for the last 19 months. Exhibit 5 shows the HOA email where they changed my contact without my authorization. Exhibit 6 is the notice that they taped to my door. Exhibit 7 is the alleged lease. I did not sign it. Exhibit 8 shows utility portal changes. Exhibit 9 is the locksmith voicemail. Exhibit 10 is my porch and my key. I didn't say title speaks last. I didn't have to." The judge read, "Deeds are loud when you let them be." "Ms. Kestrel," the judge said finally, voice measured, "do you pay rent to anyone for this property?" "No," I said. "I pay property taxes to the county and utilities to the providers." "Counsel," she said to the attorney, "address why this is not a wrongful detainer." The attorney cleared his throat, shuffled, tried a different angle. "There was a verbal agreement," he said. "Family arrangements?" "Put the evidence on the record," the judge said, not unkindly. "Not the adjectives." Lila leaned into the microphone, hands shaking slightly, the cranberry sleeve pulling back to reveal that bracelet she wears with the little fake pearls. "She knows the deal," she said. "We agreed she'd pay market rent and help family. She's ungrateful." She looked at me then, and the mask slipped a fraction, enough to see the place where she believed entitlement becomes policy. "It's our turn. She sits on equity she won't use, and we need the income. Everyone does it. It was the everyone that made the judge's eyebrows go up half a centimeter, the way Officer Keenes had in another life across town. The judge turned the deed around so the courtroom seal faced out and read the first 2 lines aloud. The part where my name sits square and unremarkable. Grant deed. The undersigned grantors declares document transfer tax is $0. Grantee, Naomi Kestrel, an unmarried woman, as trustee of the Kestrel Living Trust. She let it sit there for a beat like a note held just long enough to be heard. Then she said, in a tone that made the words heavier, "Ownership controls occupancy." It wasn't a gavel moment. It was a sentence that closed a door. She dismissed the unlawful detainer with prejudice, which meant they could not come back with a cleaned-up version. She granted my request for fees and costs, $4,650 I had documented down to the dollar, and ordered LMI to file a retraction letter with the HOA and utilities. She advised that any further entries without permission would be trespass. She did not lecture. She did not look at Lila again. She looked at the attorney and said, "Counsel, advise your clients to respect title. Title speaks last," I heard Asha say in my head. And in my pocket my phone buzzed once, a text from her that contained only 3 words and a period. How'd it go? The reckoning outside the courtroom was quiet and ugly in the way water on oil is ugly. Victor caught my sleeve and then let go when the bailiff glanced our direction. "You don't do this to family," he said. Lower now, the smile gone as if it had been rented. "I don't do this to family," I said. "I do this to liars." Lila kept her eyes on the floor tiles, little squares that didn't line up where 2 wings of the building met. "We just needed relief," she said, softer now. And in the way she said relief, I heard the true thing. The credit cards, the car payment, the pyramids they'd built expecting someone else to be the base. "You could have talked to us." "I did," I said, and touched my file. "With paper." We signed in a conference room with laminate tables that scarred if you breathed on them. A stipulation of dismissal with prejudice. A fee agreement. A mutual no trespass understanding. A written retraction to the HOA and utility providers. A promise to retract any tenant designation from any list or portal within 72 hours. Victor's signature got messier with each page. Lila's stayed neat. She has always been neat when she is wrong. They slid keys across the table that I hadn't asked for, a theater of possession. I didn't touch them. I stood up, thanked their attorney for keeping his face civil, and walked out into sun that made everything look as if it had been wiped again for company. The calls didn't stop immediately. I counted 29 the first night after court. I didn't answer any. The voicemails changed outfits again. Remorse, anger, bargaining. "We can settle for $15,000, Victor said, as if he were hailing a taxi. "Let's start over," Lila said. And then, 2 hours later, "You will regret this." I set my phone face down and wrote in my notebook, the little black one I keep for when I need to remind myself what I already know. I am not a tenant in my own life. Title speaks last. I don't raise my voice. I raise documents, 3 pages. 8 staples. $50,000 in bold. 29 missed calls. 0 replies. I own what I can prove. I am not your tenant. Paper beats volume. The HOA sent an email 2 days later. "We regret the confusion," it began, as if confusion had been the actor. They reinstated my email and apologized for any distress this may have caused. The utility portals returned to me with password resets that felt like small apologies without faces. The locksmith left a note in my mailbox with a discount card I will never use. A patrol car idled on my street twice the next week and then stopped. News traveled the way bad recipes do, through kitchens trimmed for convenience. A month out, the money arrived as a paper check on thick stock, $4,650, costs and fees exactly as ordered. The memo line read, Kestrel Visa LMI. I deposited it with the calm that comes after a fever breaks. In my kitchen, I took the orange notice out of its plastic sleeve and tucked it behind a page in my manila folder. I placed my deed on top so the county stamp looked down on the insult like a chaperone. Saw Lila once more at a grocery store on a Sunday when I wore a baseball cap and she wore that cranberry blazer as if the color might change her fortunes. She avoided my aisle, pretended the soup display held her recipe's only hope. She looked smaller, the way people do when the room no longer obeys their staging. I did not make eye contact. I bought peaches, onions, and the good jam. I went home and wrote another sentence in my notebook. Keys know who they belong to. It's not the lock. It's the hand that's steady. The house became itself again the way a person's face returns after a hard cry. Quietly, with generosity. I repainted the doorframe where the tape had pulled paint. I replaced the side gate lock with a kit from the hardware store and a screwdriver that belonged to my grandfather. Handle nicked where he'd pried something loose once and laughed. The rosemary kept growing, indifferent to drama, which I admire in plants and admire in myself when I remember how. On a Thursday evening in September, I opened the drawer of my desk and took out the thin brass key my grandfather had given me the day we recorded my deed. It had a small notch you couldn't see unless you knew it was there, a quirk in the cut that made the turn feel like a secret handshake. I set it on a square of index card and wrote in neat letters the words he taught me to believe: own what you can prove. Then I slid the card into a tiny frame I found at a thrift store for 75 cents, the kind meant for a wallet photo of a child who has just learned to wear shoes with laces. I stood it on my bookshelf next to the manila folder and the little dish where I empty my pockets. It is not a shrine. It is stewardship of the simple things that hold a life in place: paper, keys, names spelled right. The last text I saved in the folder on my phone labeled LMI wasn't from Lila or Victor. It was from Asha. Title speaks last, she wrote again the day the retraction letters posted, because some sentences deserve to be said more than once. I typed back, thanks for speaking first. She sent a smile I couldn't see, but I could feel the steadiness of a person whose job is to pull truth through a sieve and lay it on a table. I did not become a crusader. I did not post the orange notice online. I did not declare a lesson to anyone who didn't ask. My justice is quiet because I need my house to be quiet so I can think and sleep and listen to the kettle. It is work to keep a life unflustered in a world that rewards spectacle. Paper helps. People like Asha help. Titles, stamps, little clicking fans, and sticky notes with true words help. On a late afternoon when the jacaranda had let go again, and purple made a brief carpet I didn't want to crush, I stood on my porch with a brush and touched up the last of the tape scars. The sun sheeted gold along the street in that way that makes everything look briefly framed. The brass letters of my name on the mailbox caught and held the light. NAOMIKESTREL. I ran my finger under the last letter and felt the edge, crisp from the day I installed it. Inside, the little framed index card watched the room like a modest sentry. I closed the door and turned the key and listened to the lock do what it was meant to do. Speak last, quietly, conclusively, without asking anyone's permission.